Good morning. I'm Lucy Crandall. I'm with the Seniors Blue Book. And today we are going to be talking about seniors really that are still in their homes and maybe some options that they might have. So today I have JoCarol and Dana with me. And we're just going to kind of jump right in. JoCarol, I know you're a realtor, but you're also an SRES, and I'm not 100% sure what that means. Can you help me?
Sure. Realtors, there's a lot of training and education that goes into being a realtor and a lot of continuing education just to keep your license. But the National Association of Realtors also offers additional training that, you see realtors' names with all these letters behind them. What that means is that they've done additional training to get a specialty designation. One of those designations is the SRES. What that means, or what it stands for, is Seniors Real Estate, and it's just awarded only to realtors that have that additional education. The training is kind of interesting. It includes, all kinds of interesting stuff, but that would include things like learning about all the different housing types for the 50 and over market. One of the more interesting sections that I found was learning about the different life stages and the generational viewpoints, how millennials see things versus baby boomers, as well as all those life transitions in accordance with housing choices. Looking at how homes can be adapted for safety, for allowing people to age in place, and learning how things like reverse mortgages, pensions, 401 accounts, all of those affect your housing decisions. So that kind of helps an SRES as they deal with seniors and their families when they're trying to figure out the next steps.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that funding piece up, because I think that's a huge question for a lot of people. And luckily we have Dana here, who is a mortgage broker. And again, help me out here, because I'm not 100% sure what a broker is versus a lender. And I'm not, so again, help me out, Dana.
Okay. Hi, thank you for having us on. So a mortgage broker is a loan officer that works for a company that doesn't fund the loans themselves. So we work with over 40 lenders to try to find the best loan product through all of the lenders for our clients' needs. And for reverse mortgages, we have at least 4 lenders that offer reverse mortgages. So once I talk to a client, figure out that a reverse mortgage is the right steps for them to proceed to see if it works, then I would choose which lender I thought would fit the need and the timing for the client. So, and a mortgage banker is a loan officer that works for a company that actually funds the loans themselves. So they only have their products.
Gotcha.
So
yeah. You're able to kind of look at the situation and find the right product versus forcing them into the wrong product, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah. And it gives the client options. Whereas if you're a mortgage banker, which I used to be, you just work with the company that you work for, and you can only sell their product. So if they don't do a reverse mortgage, you can't help the client. You have to refer them to somebody else. If they do offer reverse mortgages, then they may only offer one product of a reverse mortgage, whereas the lenders we work with, they offer more than just one product.
Well, and so you bring up a really interesting point, this reverse mortgage thing. And I think, I've heard it's a great option for some people, but I've also, heard that maybe it's not the best option. So what is a reverse mortgage? Like, what are the benefits of it? Who does that work for? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So you have to be 62 years or older in order to obtain a reverse mortgage. And it's basically a mortgage where you don't have to make a mortgage payment, which is pretty incredible. So we call it a reverse mortgage because it's opposite, right, of a forward mortgage, which is your the normal of what people usually refer to on a mortgage for purchasing a home is where you go out, you borrow money, and then you have to make a mortgage payment each month. Well, on a reverse mortgage, you're borrowing the money, but you don't have to make a payment, which is pretty incredible. So a lot of people find that it works for them when they're in a situation. For example, a senior citizen, a lot of times are on limited incomes. So if you're in a situation where you need additional income and you don't have any other resources, but you own a home and you have equity in that home, then a reverse mortgage might be the right answer for you. Other options is some people, believe it or not, in this age group of 50 and older is the highest divorce rate in the country. And so maybe you're going through a divorce, but you want to keep the property. And part of the settlement is one of you get to keep the property, right? Or you have to sell it. If you want to stay in place, like JoCarol was talking about, maybe a reverse mortgage might work for you. It might be an option that you're able to stay in the home. Other benefits of getting a reverse mortgage, or for people who have monthly debt and they don't necessarily have the income to offset all of that debt. So they can use a reverse mortgage to pay off debt. So you can pay off a mortgage, you can pay off debt. It lets you stay in the home and you don't have to make a payment.
So it sounds like a great option for folks, in the right situation. And
right.
Kind of what I'm hearing from both of you, like selling a home for a senior is a kind of a different ballgame than just your everyday real estate transaction. So I don't know, JoCarol, do you want to take this one? What makes working with a senior, or selling a home that someone's been in for 50 years or that kind of thing, like what makes that different than most mortgage or real estate transactions?
Right. And it's a great question. I mean, many homeowners have bought and sold homes many times over in their life, but selling a senior's home is it's more complicated because there's so many unique issues and decisions that go with it, and sometimes it's more complicated just because of the number of people involved, the adult children, and there's just a lot going on there. And even though it may be that senior who's made the decision they're going to sell, all of those family members play a role. And so it can become pretty complicated. There's a lot of questions to answer. And one of those, as we already talked about, is moving really the best alternative. And I mean, have they explored their other options like a reverse mortgage? One of the biggest ones that I come across all the time, and not just with seniors, by the way, but is what is the best way to downsize a lifetime worth of possessions and family heirlooms? This is a big challenge for a lot of people. And I mean, then what are the tax related implications of selling? Some of those things, the logistical and emotional issues involved with selling, that family home can be really stressful for any family to deal with, because that move doesn't feel the same as all those previous moves. That part of the SRES training can really help. By that SRES, realtor can foresee those challenges coming and can help guide families through that process. So maybe it's a little bit less stressful and hopefully more successful. So
I'm so happy to hear from both of you that there's programs that have been developed to really help seniors make better decisions about, where they need to go or where they need to stay, really. So let's say, my mom needs to sell her home and move into assisted living, or that's what we think. And we call you and say, sell this home. What are the next steps for both of you? How do you guys work together? How do you, take on that process? What's the time frame? What's all that look like?
The first thing I want to do is sit down with you and is it your mom that's going to sell? Right. Okay. So with you and your mom and siblings, if they're going to be involved, and just talk about what led to that decision and where she's going. Do you have a time frame that works best for her? And then I'll tailor the listing process, the staging, if we're going to do that, the showings, to fit her needs and her comfort level, her lifestyle. Because I got to tell you, in this real estate market, it's crazy. And once we list a home, if you don't have control of it, the showings are going to be back to back, and that is very stressful, especially for your mom, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to deal with those things up front and kind of figure out the best path for her.
And so, Dana, what's your sort of part in all of that, or what would that scenario look like for you?
If somebody wants to explore a reverse mortgage, basically we do an interview. There's questions that we have to ask. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't expect my dog to bark. There's questions that we ask to explore the reverse mortgage to see if it actually works for them. And if it does, then we go through an application process. The senior has to actually go through a counseling session, and most of those are done over the phone. That is required even to obtain before you can even apply for the mortgage. And then once that is done and they still want to continue forward, then we do the loan application, submit it to the lender that we choose. Once it's approved, then an appraisal is ordered. And this is what I find fascinating, is if an FHA mortgage is chosen over a private reverse mortgage, FHA, a lot of times, according to where the home is, and especially on the western slope, could require 2 appraisals, which slows down the process. So that's important for the person to know. And the other thing that I think is important for people to know that I didn't know until I started doing these reverse mortgages, is we have to explain to the client, for example, if it's your mom, maybe they've lived in the home for 50 years or 40 years or 30 years. And some people maintain their homes and some people don't. So I educate my clients to say, look, the appraisal is an important process, and these are the requirements that they're going to look at. So make sure you have smoke detectors, make sure you have carbon monoxide detectors, make sure you don't have any peeling paint, kind of go through what to expect through each process. And once the application is done, the appraisals are done, then that's when you actually lock in the interest rate and prepare to close the loan for the client. So it's a very interesting process.
Is a reverse mortgage like harder to qualify for than a regular mortgage? Or, I mean, they're kind of not really the same thing, but I guess the question is a reverse mortgage hard to qualify? Do you have to have really great credit? Do you have to have a ton of equity?
Yes. Okay. So you do have to have equity in the home. So they've created a mathematical algorithm of a chart that we look at, and it's huge. And it's based on the age of the person and the current interest rates. So for example, in today's market, let's say you're 66 years old, you want to explore a reverse mortgage, and let's just throw out an example of the interest rates are between 3% and 4%. You're probably going to be able to borrow about 50% of the equity in the property of the appraised value. So the important thing to know is these reverse mortgages are not wiping out people's equity. They're not getting 100%, where they don't have anything left on the mortgage, right? So they do that to protect the senior. So I would say, I think I answered your questions. If not, let me remind me of which one I didn't.
No, I think you did. It was really, are they hard to qualify for, and do you have to have equity? So it sounds
they're not hard to.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So they're not hard to qualify for. The thing that you have to keep in mind is you do have to continue to pay your taxes and your insurance on your own. And I think I found that fascinating when I started doing these mortgages, because on an FHA forward mortgage, a regular mortgage that the majority of the people obtain, they require that you escrow that, meaning that the lender pays that. But on a reverse mortgage, it's just the opposite. They expect the senior to pay the taxes and the insurance. And I'm like, isn't that fascinating? And it's because you're borrowing a lump sum of money and you don't have to make a payment, right?
Right, that
So
makes sense.
you then have to be responsible to pay the taxes and the insurance.
I
So
guess
it's
I
not
didn't-
hard. Yeah. Go
Sorry, I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I guess I didn't realize that reverse mortgages were created just for seniors. I mean,
Right.
you know, like that, to me, that's a factoid that folks need to know, because this is a program that we created, our country created, in order to
Yes.
help folks stay in their home. And it's not a
Yes,
sham, and it's, you know, it's a legitimate way to make that happen. So
Right.
that is fascinating. And I'm so glad we got to talk today, because I really
Yeah.
learned a lot about a reverse mortgage.
And I know Dana's probably going to talk about this, but it's the other really cool thing about that you can do with a reverse mortgage is you can buy a house with a reverse mortgage. You can either stay in the home that you've got and you've got the equity in that she's been talking about, or you know, I had a client that actually was moving from the Midwest where home prices are so much lower than here, and they had this lovely home that they owned. They sold it for, you know, what would be a ridiculous price in Grand Junction, Colorado. They sold it for like $200,000. If we had it here, it would be much, much, much more expensive. But so they had all this cash, but it wasn't enough to buy an equal home here. So they purchased with the reverse mortgage by putting that 50% or whatever the number was down, so that they could buy it, and then they live, you know, with no mortgage on this new home that they bought.
So I mean, if you're thinking of making a change at all, if you're a senior and you have any kind of equity in your home, you really need to talk to both an SRES realtor and a reverse mortgage person, so that you know all your options. And really, that's, to me, that's the key, is folks need to understand what the options are so that they can make their best decision and, you know, hopefully figure out whether they're ready to move on or ready to stay. But I guess that's maybe my last question for you guys before we wrap things up. But when is the right time? You know, like, you've been living in your home for 60 years, maybe your spouse is gone, it's a little bit too big for you. You know, like, when do you pull the trigger, so to speak? When do you start talking to people?
It's such a personal question, really. And most folks, I think they would prefer to continue living in their home if they can, and, you know, to age in place. But sometimes it works. Sometimes it's a great option. But sometimes you know, the circumstances do point to selling as the better option. And I think you know, there's things that come along, and probably one of the biggest is when home maintenance becomes a burden. You know, or like, you go home, you've always been, you know, you've been to your parents' house and it's spotless and the garden is gorgeous. And this time you go home and, you know, nobody's maintaining the yard anymore and the house isn't clean. Those are signs that maybe it's time to talk about making a move or making a change. But you see major life events that force that move, or aging parents that want to live closer to children. Sometimes, unfortunately, it is about financial concerns that make it hard to keep your home. And that's when you want to talk to Dana before you make those final decisions. And then, I mean, ultimately, sometimes the support services that are needed can't be provided in a home, like if it's medical or something.
Yeah.
But I think eventually most of us come to that place where we have to sell.
Yeah. I think eventually, I mean, even a reverse mortgage, you know, there's probably
Yeah.
going to come a time when you just can't
Exactly.
live in your own home anymore and you need a little more help. So yeah, nice.
I agree with JoCarol. Just on a personal note, when my parents got to the point where my dad was ill all the time, and they had a house and they had all this land and they weren't able to maintain it, just like JoCarol said, we had a family meeting. All of us got together, we sat down, and of course it was so painful for my parents to even have this conversation, because that generation did not want to talk about it. They're not used to asking for help.
Talk about much in the way of personal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they're just very private. And so it was a really hard topic to even bring up. but I think somebody in the family has to take the responsibility. I used to work in the medical field, and it's so important. I tell people, you always have to have an advocate for you, no matter who you are, what age you are, but especially a senior. And so it was a loving conversation with my parents. And even though my mom was very against selling the house, because they're so independent, they don't like to ask for help. Sometimes you just have to explain or share with them that you see the differences, you see what's happening, and you just need to help and to be a part of their life at that point, and almost take a reverse, not just a reverse mortgage, but a reverse role, which was really hard for me.
Right.
So it's a fascinating time. So just being in that age group, I think it's important that you have people like JoCarol and myself, and you, Lucy. Your book was amazing. I used it so much. It's so helpful. So I think just having that network of people to tap into, and then they know somebody else who you should be talking to.
Right.
You know, whether it's a financial planner, or maybe it's an estate attorney, or whoever. We're
Yep.
here to help, and that's why we got into the business, was to help.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's such an important point. People don't know what they don't know. You know what I mean? And I think so often folks make decisions and they don't have all the information they could have. And maybe there were other options. So again, I appreciate you bringing up the book, but really that's our goal, is to give people as much information as we can so that they can make their best decision, because there's no cookie cutter for aging, right? Like we all are, like you said, it's a very personal thing, and everybody has their own history and their own things. And I'm just so happy. I've learned some things today. One, I learned that SRESs have some really good training, and I'm so happy to hear that part of that training is initiating these kinds of conversations and sort of helping to open that line of communication with families. And then the other thing I learned today too was that reverse mortgages were created specifically for seniors to meet a need. And to me, that just says a lot about sort of both lines. So I appreciate you guys being here and helping to educate me, and probably everybody else that's watching. So that's great. But the most important thing is, if we have somebody that's, looking, how do they get a hold of you guys? Where can they find you? Give us your contact info. It's also in the text, but let us know where to find you right now.
Okay. I'm Carol Haxel. I'm with HomeSmart Realty Partners in Grand Junction. My office is at 431 Colorado Avenue. My email is easy. It's JoCarol at jchcells.com, and 683-0126.
Okay, say that phone number again, because we had a little glip, I think.
We had a glip. Okay. 970-683-0126.
Perfect.
And Dana, how about you? How do we get a hold of you?
Hi. Okay. So my phone number is 303-921-1238. The website is Aslan Home Lending. Actually, it's Aslan. It's kind of difficult. Sorry. The company is Aslan Home Lending Corporation, but the website is aslanhlc.com. And then you can just put / and then my name is very difficult. So it's DZIAGWA at the end, and it'll pull me up, or you can just look up the loan officers and find me in the listing. And I also have a, a personal website that links over there, and it's loansbydana.com, which makes it really simple to find me.
Nice.
And I work from my home.
Contact info will be in the text as well. So.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, both.
Thanks
so
for
much
having us, Lucy.
I love a morning where I get to learn some things and find out some new information. And we get so many calls. So I'm so excited that you guys are on board, and hopefully you're going to be able to help a lot of people out there on the Western Slope figure out what they need to do and make the right decision. So thanks for all that you guys do for seniors. And Thanks for being with me this morning.
Thank you.
All right, have a good
Thank you.